You've spent hours setting your goals for the year, and yet within a week, your calendar is hijacked by last minute meetings and quick asks. If you can't say no, your goals are just a wish list. Today, I'm showing you how to say no at work in a way that actually makes you look more strategic, not lazy. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn in my 13 years at Google is that saying yes to everything was actually making me a worse employee. I thought that being a team player meant taking everything on, but it was actually stalling my impact because I was spread too thin. I used 4 tactics to say no at work respectfully. The first one is focused on the opportunity cost. Now, being a high value employee doesn't mean you're working the most number of hours. It's about the return on investment of those hours. When a colleague drops a quick ask at your desk, it means that you're taking your focus away from a higher value task to something that is not as valuable to the company. When you think of it from the perspective of the opportunity cost of the return on investment of your time for the broader company, it becomes much easier to say no, and it's also a very reasonable ask. Let's look at an example. If one of your annual goals is to increase the efficiency of the team by 20%, and there are key tasks that you have to take care of in Q1 in order to achieve that goal by Q4, and you drop those tasks and take on a low value task, let's say creating a deck for a presentation that is not that important, then the ROI is actually near zero on the time that you've spent. So when you frame it like that, you're not being mean to your colleague, you're just being a thoughtful steward of the resources of the company. Here is how I would approach a similar situation. Hey, Susie, thank you so much for thinking of me for this presentation. It's awesome that you think I can contribute. However, I'm working on this B1 project for my VP, and it's due on Friday, and it's actually going to have an impact of X dollars on my book of business. Can I get back to you tomorrow once I have a little bit more bandwidth? That way, you're not blatantly saying, no, maybe there is more to that presentation that you don't know about. What you're saying is that, hey, this is priority number 1 for me, and I need to get it done in the next couple of days. So let's chat and figure out how I can help you best later. This is a perfect example of the second way of saying no when maybe that ROI conversation doesn't quite fit. Now, the sandwich method is pretty common, and I'm sure you've heard of it. What makes it even more effective is if you can be very specific. Because when you say a generic no, usually what the other person thinks is that you're making up an excuse. And it may not be an excuse, but the more specific you can be, the more reassurance you can provide to your colleague that you actually have something that is a bigger priority for the organization that you're working on. So you're not just saying no because you don't want to be helpful, you're saying no because you're working on something that's more important. You could say something like, I see why Q3 launch for this project is incredibly important. That totally makes sense. However, for this quarter, we're really focusing on closing the gap for our book of business, and we have a $2 million gap this quarter. So I need to completely focus on these tasks that are going to drive revenue for our customers. How about I set up some time with you on Monday because I have a relatively free morning, and we can talk about how I can help you and make sure that we do this Q3 launch. See how that sounds considerate and helpful, and yet you're being firm about the boundaries and protecting your time so that you can work on things that matter the most. The third scenario came up when my manager had asked for me that I had to say no to. Now, this may not happen if your manager has full visibility into your goals and understands them properly. So I recommend spending some time going over those goals and making sure that your manager is aligned on what you're spending your time on. However, even if you do all of that, it does come up. And so this is how I would tackle it. If your manager says, hey, I need you to work on this project and get it done by end of this week, what you could say, is that, oh, remember we had that conversation last week and I'm actually focused on this other project. Maybe we can drop this third project that I was working on, which is the lowest impact project and was priority 3 anyway. What do you think? That way, not only are you being reasonable about the workload you're taking on, but you're also being strategic about what are the things you're going to be dropping rather than just missing things because you're too busy. It's important to make sure that you're not overworking yourself to the point where you can't complete the important tasks properly. If you're spread too thin and if you're only doing an average job across the tasks that you have, then chances are you're not going to be recognized as one of the top performers by your leadership team. The fourth tactic I used to say no at work was to not give them an answer immediately. You can tell them that, hey, I need some time to figure out whether I have bandwidth to work on this project or not. Because maybe the task for the project that you're being given last minute is a 3-month commitment. Maybe you don't know all the details of what goes into the project and therefore you don't know how much time it's going to take. Maybe you can't decide that in a split second or 5 or 10 minutes. So take those 24 hours, look at your priorities, look at the task, assess how much time it's going to take you, what would you have to drop in order to pick this up, and then you can provide a more thoughtful answer, whether that's a yes or a no. And if it's a no, then use the first 3 tactics that we talked about. Mastering the strategic no is how you protect your time, but that's only part of the equation to going from a top performer to a promotion nominee. To figure out that gap, I've created a free quiz for you to diagnose exactly what you need to do to get unstuck in your career growth. The link is in the description.